Welcome to today's episode of the Working Wisdom podcast series, brought to you by the C.T. Bauer College of Business at the University of Houston. We're having a conversation about work-life balance, how to navigate and overcome challenges within your career, and how to make business more accommodating to a diverse workforce.
Well, hey there, everyone. My name is Giovanni Rosselli. I'm the Director of Alumni Relations for the Bauer College of Business here at the University of Houston.
And I'm Major General Barrye Price, Major General retired U.S. Army. I'm a 1985 alum from the Bauer College of Business.
Well, Major General Barrye Price, I'd be remiss if I did not formally introduce you with that title. I know you have given me the ability to call you Barry, even though it still feels a bit odd for me to do, but I will take you at your word. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? I know there's obviously a Bauer and a UH connection, but I'd love for our audience to get your story in a nutshell, if that's all right.
Sure. So I'm Barrye Price. I'm originally from Gary, Indiana. Graduated high school there. First year of college, I went to a military college in Lexington, Missouri. Two-sport athlete, baseball and basketball. Transferred to Houston after a season in a military school where you're outside every day 3 times for formation, in the dead of winter. And I remember one winter day, freezing day, standing saying, man, I'll be in Houston next year. That won't be any of this type of weather. So Houston, there we came. Me and my best friend actually were both from Gary, graduated high school together from Gary, Indiana, went to military school together, and then transferred to the University of Houston. I was at Houston for 4 years, majoring in business administration. Wonderful experience. Graduated, distinguished military graduate from the ROTC program there, and came into the Army in 1985. And I stayed in the Army till 2016, 31 years. Achieved the rank of Major General, which am only one of 150 Major Generals in the entire U.S. Army. Retired in 2016 and joined a nonprofit. My college roommate from the University of Houston, a guy named Carl Holmes, was my roommate my last 3 years of college. And my last semester of college, Carl was exposed to crack cocaine by his girlfriend. And unfortunately, Carl was addicted and suffered from substance use disorder for the 30 years that I was in the military. And a year before I retired, Carl succumbed to 30 years of addiction. And that was probably the greatest failing of my life, my feeling that I couldn't help Carl. All I was armed with was just say no. Carl's picture sits on my desk right now, every day, as a reminder of what I'm doing right now, as to why I'm doing it. I'm currently the CEO of a nonprofit called the Community Anti-Drug Coalitions of America, which builds safe, healthy, and drug-free communities domestically and abroad. We have more than 5,000 coalitions that's focused on illegal and illicit drugs, on cessation of all uses of tobacco, and on underage drinking. And we built these community-based, multi-sector, evidence-based coalitions that focuses on those issues. I'm in this job because of Carl's death and that failing that I couldn't help Carl. I didn't understand screening, brief intervention, and referral to treatment. I didn't understand, opioids, benzodiazepines, hypnotics, and stimulants. I didn't understand, anything about that. And so I was ill-equipped to help my former roommate. But since I couldn't help him, I decided to take this job that I might help scores of others who are similarly suited. And it's been the most rewarding thing I've done in my life today.
Well, I greatly appreciate you sharing that arc of a story. And, I find it rare that that one can really find that personal of a connection with their job. I mean, That's not to say we don't enjoy our work and we can't find some meaning in it, but it's a very personal um, personal story that you have there, and I commend you for putting that experience into something positive, and you're really making such a difference in the lives of so many people.
Yeah, and I tell you that when I retired in 2016, this was the date that I decided that I would take this particular job. Initially, I was the executive vice president and chief operating officer of the organization, but the reason that I took the job was really Carl's death, and again, it was a personal failing. I felt a great sense of a failure that I was unable to help him. And I tell you that I plan on getting it right with the scores or legions of others who are similarly suited going forward.
Mhm.
But thank you for that.
What's been your biggest lesson as if you as you've assumed the role, this important role? Do you find that other people have similar thought processes, that maybe they had a loved one that they felt that they couldn't help, and um, how have
Yeah,
you been able to kind of help them through
yeah.
that?
So there are probably more than 200,000 uh, volunteers that make up those more than 5,000 coalitions worldwide. And interestingly enough, I meet people at all of our uh, trainings who had somebody in their family. Many of them had somebody in their family that's been negatively affected. You know, one thing that I've learned about is addiction. And boy, if I'd known this with Carl, I could have helped him much more. But the brain fully forms by age 25. The science of the brain, and after age 25, when the brain is fully formed, there's less chance that one will become addicted to, you know, uh, anything addictive, uh, but greater chance while the brain is forming. And I've met scores of people who have lost loved ones. I've sat with people who have had people uh, 5 times this drug called naloxone or Narcan, which they call the drug reversal, the overdose reversal drug. I've met scores of people whose loved one or child has been brought back 5 times with that. And it just really reminds you. I mean, and I've had one parent tell me that her daughter was angry after being brought back the fourth time because it cut her high. The euphoria that she was feeling from the effects of the drugs, you know, she was angry because it it knocked off her buzz. And so one of the things that reminds me of how addictive these substances are. And we're on a campaign right now to, especially with opioids, stimulants, benzodiazepines, and hypnotics, those types of drugs. We're on a campaign to ask pharmacies to go dispense a drug deactivation kit. We know that 64.6% of the people who are taking opiates or who are addicted to opioids, never had a prescription. So only 34.4% of people who had who have those drugs, I mean, have a prescription. And so we're on a blitz for a tremendously upstream solution for primary prevention, which is co-dispensing, so that as a person finishes with their drugs, after they've satisfied their needs for the drugs, they can render those drugs inert and irreversibly retrievable, and then they can just throw that thing into the trash, and then those drugs are out of circulation. And
Mm.
that's something that we're pushing hard for right now.
That's great. That's great work. Where can our viewers and our listeners go to learn more about those efforts?
So they can go to CADCA.org, or they can go to Verde.org, which is the owner or the producer of the Deterra drug deactivation system. And yet, interestingly enough, the pharmacy school uh, uh, uses these deactivation kits. So they have them there on campus at the university at the pharmacy school.
Mhm. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. That's great for just general awareness. Um, well, I'd love to transition, and maybe we can pull on this thread of kind of the leadership that you're exhibiting here, and maybe you can kind of share with our viewers and listeners maybe what leadership lessons you learned from the University of Houston and your time at Bauer. I know that you were also in ROTC while you were at UH, and of course you went on to serve in the military. But kind of what experiences were able to translate from UH?
Yeah, well, my transcripts will reveal that I was in survival mode while at the Bauer College of Business. Yeah, I wasn't like, boy, I've met some remarkable youth, modern day students, modern day who are setting the world on fire, who have achieved academic excellence, and that would come to me later in life. I was really in survival mode at college. I'm the first of my family to graduate from college, and so I didn't really have a template in which to follow, and so. But tremendous lessons of leadership since leaving Bauer. And first thing that I would tell you, and though I wasn't, I mean, I'm a 2.89 student at the Bauer School of Business, but what I learned was that my education really prepared me for everything that I had done since Bauer. You know, I went on to Texas A&M to get a master's and a PhD, a perfect 4.0 GPA from there. I went to the National Defense University, got a master's in public policy, I mean, in international strategy and uh, perfect 4.0 GPA. And so I learned what not to do, after Bauer. But as far as leadership, boy, I learned that leadership is a hands-on endeavor, that you have to be involved, you have to be engaged, that it's not an issue of hoping something happens, but you are engaged to help ensure that it happens. You mitigate, risk. You're prudent, risk taker. And so those are all things that I learned at Bauer. Likewise, I learned tremendous lessons in culture, in the culture of an organization, and how to, as a leader, establish a culture. I learned things like a clan culture, which is, a familial, culture. I learned about adhocracy culture, which is really that, brainstorming and whiteboarding things and bringing different people, infusing different ideas and different systems together to work towards equitable solutions. I learned about a market culture, which really is driven by external demands, supply and demand. I learned about a hierarchical culture, which really is the culture of the military, which is lines vertically, horizontal, vertically aligned, leader at the top, and different echelons of leadership. But all of that, I learned more about something that they didn't give me, but that I learned, which made more sense, is kind of a hybrid culture, which infuses the best of all of those other cultures to establish an organizational climate that's healthy, that's founded on dignity and respect, that has a sense of belonging for everybody that's a part of the team. And I learned more than that, not what to think, but how to think, and how to think critically. And so the Bauer College and the university writ large, because at least half of my classes at the university, maybe three quarters of them, were outside of the hallowed halls of the Bauer College. But college did that for me, gave me a phenomenal foundation of how to think. And And the piece that I didn't know until my first day of active duty is how equipped, I was for life. You don't know what you don't know until you face something different. And I would tell you there's a tremendous appreciation for me uh, in the Bauer College. And I would tell you that my journey was really away from Houston and away from Bauer. I married a young lady that was also a Bauer College grad. My first wife, she died in 2001, and it was really her death that brought me back to the Bauer College. Dean Art Varga was a tremendous friend, and Art's. If you can see the picture that kind of sits, kind of canted on the top of that bookcase next to me, that's me and Art Varga. What a remarkable man and his team. When my wife died, I wanted to create legacy to immortalize her. And so the thing that I thought of, especially in that her parents and her family were all from Houston, was to gift the school and create a memorial scholarship in her name. And that has been a remarkable opportunity for me to re-engage with the school, for me to see the difference in the school, the new Bauer versus the Houston College of Business Administration, which it was when I was there. And God, I just fell in love with the school. I fell in love with the students. I fell in love with the leadership. I fell in love with the trajectory that it was on. I fell in love with Ted Bauer. I was able to meet Ted and actually had lunch with Ted a couple of times. And what a remarkable humanitarian. And I got to tell you that his benevolence really opened me to my responsibility back to the school. And so I've just recently connected with some students who are Bauer students right now that I'll connect with next week, who are here in Washington, D.C. And I want to be a part of the sowing of the new seeds, of paying it forward to the next generation, to show them that a part of growing up and becoming a leader is to give back.
Absolutely. You're singing all the right tunes. The your story, I believe, is quintessentially Bauer. I think you'll be happy and proud to know that the majority of our students are still first generation students. Many of them work while they're going through school. So some of
Mm,
those parallels that you mentioned in your story,
mm.
they're still alive and well here at Bauer and the University of Houston. So I'm appreciative of you sharing that journey. Um, you know, part of the audience that listens to and views this podcast, it's kind of a mix of external stakeholders, but mostly it's internal stakeholders. It's students, it's alumni, both recent and more seasoned. Um, you know, would you mind kind of diving into, um, was it innate for you to remain plugged in to your alma mater in such a substantive way, or did you really have to um, make an effort to do so? Was it kind of this automatic thing, or and maybe to add on top of that question, maybe if you could stress the importance of why it's key to remain plugged in. um,
Yeah. So
University.
so so no, it was not innate. As I shared, I'd gone to graduate school at Texas A&M, and I was really more aligned with um, Texas A&M after matriculating than I was with the University of Houston. I didn't have a great experience. I didn't think that Houston celebrated me. I didn't feel that it affirmed me. I didn't feel a sense of belonging, at the Bauer College. I mean, at the University of Houston when I was there. I didn't feel that the faculty were engaged and invested, in my life and whether I would matriculate or not. And so it was really a somewhat of an isolated experience. And but for the death of my first wife, I probably would not be connected with the school today. Now, fast forward, 15 years after I graduated, um, or 16 years when Elaine died, when I connected with the school, and I just really wanted to give them a check and then leave and let the annuity give money to some youngster. But I was doing that for Elaine. I wasn't doing that for Bauer. It was personal for me to do that, to keep her spirit alive. But when I came back, it was a totally different school. It was faculty who were engaged with students. It was faculty who knew their students' names. It was a dean who walk around the college, and and one of the things too that Truth in Lending, it wasn't one building. It wasn't a school as such. It was in the Agnes Arnold building and the McElhaney building and one other building, that so it was kind of spread over campus. And so because it was disconnected, I don't believe that it felt like a community that it feels like right now. When I came back, and God, it's been almost 21 years this year since I came back to the Bauer College. And boy, I just came to give a check, and they knew what the check was going to be. I was going to give a check for $10,000, and it wound up being 50, because I was so impressed with what the ongoings at the college, the involvement, the engagement with the students, how the students were celebrated and affirmed, how the faculty knew the students by name, how the university back in those days, they'd have a scholarship gala, where all of these kids would dress up and come, and they would receive their scholarships. And Ted Bauer was there, and so all of this kind of happened during Art Varga's watch, and it was just a totally different piece with Bob Casey and John Odell and Marcy Champagne. They were all engaged, and God, they were asking me for more. I mean, they wanted relationship. I just wanted to give a check, and it was like, okay, so I'm in. And that's how I got involved on Arts Advisory Board. But it was wonderful. There was even a time where I was considering uh, taking a job as executive director of a leadership program that was going to start, that Art had asked me to consider. But that's how significant the school had changed. And so my love affair with Bauer really started after the school had renamed itself the Bauer College, after the school had built a new facility that housed all of its treasure, and with the lion's share of its classrooms in the same building. So that's the reconnection.
That's great.
And
Well,
so, and going forward with students, one of the things that their experiences are very different than mine was, because they're affirmed, because they're connected, because the professors know them. Boy, it shouldn't be difficult at all for them to give back to the school. And one of the things that I do know, Ted's story, that Ted realized that and Mike Semo, that their fortunes were amassed on the back of Bauer students. And so why not invest back into the university that had given them so much? And so honor to both of them, those gentlemen.
absolutely. I'm glad you invoked their names as well. One of the things that I've learned, and I've been a staff member here at UH for going on 8 years now. Clearly, not as much experience as you have with the school, but it's experience no less. And even in that relatively short time frame, I've seen the university transform. There's buildings that exist now that weren't here 8 years ago.
Mhm.
So it's been really an impressive sight to see, and it is just this rocket ship of a trajectory. And as we take off, the value of your degree and those of your counterparts continues to be elevated. So it's all boats have risen as the
Yes, that's
university
good. That's
has
good.
risen, so to speak. But you invoked Mr. Bauer and Mr. Simo. A good portion of our stakeholders, um, uh, you know, have a tie to the university in other ways. And you mentioned the human capital piece, and that's so important. I'm also an alumnus of Texas A&M, so we've got that commonality there. And Diego, yes,
Gigo.
I
Yeah.
hope I don't get in trouble for saying that on
No,
Zoom.
I think we're safe. I think we're safe.
Um, but one of the things that makes the University of Houston unique is that, you know, 70, 80%, that's a guesstimate, stay in the region after they graduate.
Mhm.
So our employers and therefore some of our biggest donors understand that reality, and they understand that the future of Houston is only as bright as its flagship, and they invest accordingly. So I'm glad that you recognize that.
And I want to tell you too that I too have benefited, and I will in a couple few months. My The person that I'm going to hire as my chief of staff is a University of Houston graduate
That's wonderful.
as well. Yeah.
Continuing to pay it forward. We love it.
Yeah.
Well, Barry, it's been a pleasure chatting with you. Did you have any parting words that you wanted to leave with our viewers and our listeners? And again, understanding that they can be internal stakeholders in the form of students and alumni, or plenty of them are probably external stakeholders.
One thing that's kind of a broad net that I would pass on to the students of Bauer and the students of the university writ large is I was a White House Fellow in 1999, 2000, and this was a program that was formed under Lyndon Johnson, but a guy named John Gardner breathed life into it and pitched the idea to Lyndon Johnson, President Lyndon Johnson, and they developed this program. 756 people have been honored to have been a White House Fellow to date. And one of the things that John Gardner said is that living in a democracy was not intended to be a spectator sport, but you have to be engaged. And right now in our country is a wonderful time for civic engagement, is a wonderful time for de-escalating attitudes and focusing on bringing the country back together. This is the greatest social experiment on the face of the earth, and our democracy will certainly survive the events of last week. But I hope that cooler heads will prevail. And I would remind, somebody told me once that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And so I would ask everybody to speak with their actions, to speak with their votes, to speak with their voices to their elected officials, and to stay engaged because that's what makes our democracy so unique.
Absolutely. I really resonate with what you've just said. I appreciate you sharing that. And, you know, I also think it's important to remember that in order for people to have a seat at that table, it takes folks like yourself and even myself to help bring those people along,
Exactly.
that
Exactly.
either might not have the wherewithal to kind of insert themselves in those rooms, but legitimately might not be able to, were it not for some assistance from others.
That's true. That's so true.
Well, I have a bonus sleeper question for you, sir.
Mhm.
Um, I'd love to know what it is that is on your nightstand in the evenings. What is it that you're reading that you think would be beneficial
Yeah,
for?
well, I tell you that right now I'm not reading, but not a shameless plug, but I just published a book a month ago uh, called Homeland Defense: A Civil Unrest and Federal Intervention within the United States of America. That God, the timing could not have been more apropos and more perfect, And so I just finished yielding this book, and so I'm doing all of the things that kind of go with that book. Usually, I read two books a month, but the last 3 years I've been working on finishing this book, and it just came out November the 11th, and so that's what's on my nightstand, and lot of other things, because I'm getting a lot of calls right now, and a lot of people wanting to know what I think about what's transpiring. But I'll this too shall pass, and next month I'll go back to reading. If I could uh, uh, encourage people though to read, if there is a book that I think that people should read, two I would say, and one is a kid's book, but it's such a phenomenal lesson in life, which is the little engine that could,
Mm.
because we're all that little engine, and we need the affirmation and somebody to encourage and to help us to believe that we can. And if those things happen, usually we will. And the other is John Collins' book, Good to Great, uh, because he really provides some pro, uh, pretty incredible lessons in leadership of how to move something from good to great. And I tell you, as a practitioner of leadership, as a not just a theorist but a practitioner, I read that book with some level of suspicion and disdain, because I'm like, well, what is Collins going to tell me that I don't know already? But I tell you, I learned a lot from that book, and especially that the who is more important than the what. If you get the right who on the team, if you get the right people in the seats on the bus, if you have the right driver on the bus, it's easy to achieve the what because you have the who.
Absolutely. Well, I don't think we could close out our conversation any better other than for me to appropriately thank you for your time. I know you could be any number of places, and especially considering what's going on in our society at the moment. I think you're the perfect person to be having this conversation at this time. So thank you.
But Gio, I thank you for this opportunity, and thanks for what you're doing at the Bauer College of Business and for the university writ large. And thanks to Paul for reaching out to me, and I look forward to doing the work.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much again.
Okay. God bless.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Working Wisdom podcast series from the CT Bauer College of Business, brought to you by the Inclusive Leadership Initiative. The initiative aims to develop inclusive leaders and family-friendly cultures that support business strategy and superior business performance. For more information about Bauer and this podcast series, visit www.bauer.uh.edu/podcast.